Yes, please.
Oh, it's fine.
Oh, Patty's in here from Toronto.
Hi, Patty.
Or actually, it's Jim.
It's Jim.
Audio-visual support for Patty.
Call me tomorrow, Patty, and we'll get your 2 patterns sorted out.
So there are sleeve instructions in the handout section that you can print out.
If you didn't get them in the email.
If you didn't get them in the email. What else should they have ready?
Just notepads.
That was the only handout.
And an eager attitude. Yeah, just asleep.
Vegas, Orlando, Georgia, San Diego.
Oh my gosh.
What's hanging from the ceiling? Oh.
Valentine's Day decorations. It's a Valentine's Day.
They're all over. They're Valentine's decorations that still haven't been taken down.
We've been busy.
Mexico.
Woohoo!
Florida.
And then anybody that was just here in classes, I got Michelle's and Sharon Jacobs' lists. I got Michelle and Sharon Jacobs' lists for patterns. They'll be going out tomorrow or the next day. And then tutus will go in the mail tomorrow, I think, for Tracy and Sharon. I drink my water.
England.
What time is it in England? Come here, Beth. You won't be on camera? Hi.
11:30 p.m.
Look at the little baby. Look in the camera, Beth.
That's Basil. He's angry all the time. We don't know how old he is, but he looks old and grumpy.
Aren't you? Here's Evelyn.
Everett.
Say hi. Say hi in the camera. Hi. We'll make a leotard for you. Do you want a leotard? Oh, he does.
Someone's basset hound is looking back at us.
Oh, we're gonna make you a blue ice skating dress, like a little ice skating dog. Okay, so there's like
26.
That might be it.
27.
I'll double check.
It's 5:31. Just wait.
Yeah, we'll wait like 3 more minutes and then we'll start. Come here. Don't jump off. Don't drink Rachel's water.
Not mine anymore. I'm not drinking that.
You want a new one?
Father, son,
kissing time.
For those of you who just joined, there are sleeve instructions in the handout section.
And we're gonna fine-tune them and resend them to everybody, but it's good to look at for today, and know that we'll have another a better set coming. But all the info's there, and I already found an error on it that I made, not that.
Another one?
Yeah.
Not the first one.
No, that one's on
not an
purpose.
error. I think everyone's here.
I think that's it. How many is it at?
27, I think 29 is the
Yeah, I think that's everybody. Do you want to get a new water and then we'll start? We might have to lock the dogs up. Go back to sleep. They've been quiet for hours, and now this. When we get rolling, the first thing we're going to do is take one of the Leo bases from yesterday, get rid of the dart, and get rid of the front again. Then we're going to cut it off at the waist, and we're going to graft a short onto it to make kind of a bike-style leotard. Then we're going to add a skirt to that, just a lycra skirt for showing sake. And then we're going to add a sleeve to it. So that's the first chunk today. Then I'm going to show you how we make the leotard base into a dress with gores. So vertical seams that come from wherever you want and then go out into a skirt.
I have a question about printing the handout. It's just normal 8.5 by 11
it's
instructions.
Just, there's no scale, so whatever it prints in your printer is how it prints. However it prints in your printer is how it prints. We're ready to go?
I think so.
Oh, is everybody ready? Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so first we'll do like a smidge of review from yesterday, but it'll lead into the next thing. So let me grab a Sharpie, and some tape. I had another thing of tape. Oh, I need this tape. Does this kind of all show? Yeah, this kind of shows, right?
What are you doing? Your paper?
Yeah, I'm gonna just work on the paper right here. Okay, so I got the booty short pattern from the booty short class that kind of fits our dress form, and I've got a leotard base from yesterday that also kind of fits our dress form, because I want to show you how you can blend things together if they don't quite match. We're going to talk more about splitting the difference, so like whenever possible, split the difference. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is lay out our leotard block in order here. And for this, so we're going to make a bike unitard, which is more like a boy short on a leotard. We call it a bike tard in the United States, which isn't very sensitive, but it's just what we call them. Well, I mean, what do you call them where you're at? Everybody chime in. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark where the waist of my Leo ends. Is that what they call it in California and in Toronto?
In Australia.
And Australia. What's it called? Okay, so I'm going to cut off my trunk.
Yes, in California.
It's a high turn in California. All right, so when I cut off the trunk, here's what's cool too, is you can just tape this sucker together to make a woman's dance brief right away. If you need a pattern for a one-piece dance brief, I just love taping stuff up. So I'm gonna eyeball this dart in the back. Oh, the dogs are so loud. They'll calm down, I promise.
They were quiet all day. We got boy leg Leo.
Boy leg Leo, there we go. So what I'm doing is we're not using the crotch or the trunk of the leotard. So if I wanted to make a woman's just trunk pattern, I've got my front, which would be on the fold. So my front would be on the fold. Then this dart that's here in the back, you can get rid of. So I took that much. What was the dogs are so funny. What was here in the dart, I just moved and cut off from the back. So what I cut off from the back is going to fill in my dart. They'll calm down, I promise. The dogs will calm down. Rachel's giving them some pillows and blankets. Then I've got this awkward little angle right here. I'm just going to shave that off a little bit. And that actually leaves a bump for the butt to fill in. So now with what we just cut off from our leotard, we have a one-piece ladies trunk pattern that fits on the fold. And this is actually somewhat similar to the panty we use in the tutus. So that's something you can play with. But we're not using this for now. So we're going to put that away. Roll over here. So what I want to do now is take my back, and I'm going to show you even another way to get rid of the dart and stretch stuff. So yesterday when we had the whole base, we moved the dart over to the back and over to the sides to get rid of it. Today I'm going to show you an even easier way, which is called smash it down. So I'm going to just tape the dart together at the bottom, and my paper is standing up from the table a tiny little bit. But what's great with stretch stuff is you can fudge a little bit more. And I'm just going to smash the bubble down, and now I have a completely flat back. So I just smashed the bubble down. How slick is that? And you can never use enough tape to hold stuff together. Okay, so now we have a back. Now I have my side front and my front, and I'm going to make this the simplest So we're going to make kind of a skating dress with a boy short, but we're going to make it very simple shapes. So now I've got my front, which is also going to be on the fold, like that. And I've got, when I try to put my side to my front, I'm winding up with this dart here that I also want to get rid of. So all I'm going to do is just kind of overlap it a tiny little bit, and I'm going to fold back what I'm losing, right? I'm losing some right across the chest. So there's a couple things I can do. What I'm losing over here, so if you see this fold, that's what I'm losing when I add my side front to my front. I can just put a little tiny bump out at the side to kind of give back what I lost here. Or I can say it's stretchy, she's flat-chested, it's going to fit just fine. So that's what I'm going to actually do for today. Actually, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just overlap this and not worry about adding the bump back out, because I think everybody was on board with that yesterday. So I'm going to just make a really flat front. Okay, so now we have a front on the fold and a back. And now I'm going to deal with my short pattern, because pretty soon we're going to have to blend some stuff together, because it's not all going to fit. But that's what we're showing. And I made my short intentionally a little bit bigger so you can see how I'm going to blend it together a little more obviously. But I want to use my short with less darts in it. So we're going to get rid of some darts, and everybody should remember that from the booty short class. And I'm also going to make the front of the short on the fold. So the first thing I'm going to do is just from the straight edge down my front, I'm going to mark where I'm going to slit my fabric. So, and I'm going to cut my front crotch off. And this should be review. And if anybody doesn't have the booty short instructions, let us know through message or email, and we will get them to you. And I drafted this so quick, my edges don't all match. But I'm just going to cut them off. So now we have the front on the fold. And I'm going to first just kind of preview how much of this is going to fit together. My front kind of fits on here, although I've got this big old discrepancy at my side seam. And my back fits just a little bit shy. So actually some of this discrepancy over here, I don't know, can you get right above this for just a second? This is good to see. So here's what we're doing. We're doing give and take. So I've got my front and the front of my short, and I'm going to marry them together. But what I'm ending up with is I've got extra short on my front and missing short on my back. So I'm going to tape my front together loosely, because I might monkey with it a little bit more. I'm going to tape my front together. And then this extra, I'm going to just slice down to the bottom of the dart and slice it off, right? So here's what our front looks like now. I totally lost anyone. So this was extra on my short, and we're gonna take it away from this side of the costume and give it back to this side. And now by cutting out the dart in my short, the dart in the side seam is completely gone. We've turned it into a seam. So we're going to have a side seam going on here. And now I'm going to tape that bit of my back together. I'm trying not to blast through it. I have a tendency to talk fast. It's because I'm excited. But now check it out. Now when I close this other dart, the back of my back and the back of my short almost line up perfectly. Now if they don't, it's okay. So let's say I wound up with an extra bit. Let's say I've taped my short together and I have extra. All you're going to do is split the difference. So you're going to add a smidge to the back of your Leo and take away a smidge from your short. Or the other way you can think about it is, say you've made your leotard base and it fits perfect. So say you've made the base of the Leo and it fits, and you know that that fits her waist really good. Then you could say, I'm trusting the leotard shape and I'm going to fudge the short. So you can do either there. But I've lucked out and mine matches up pretty well. So I'm going to fold my short together. I messed the tape up. I'm going to fold my short together. And same thing, I'm losing a tiny little bit in my short, but it's not enough that I'm going to worry about it, so I'm going to just pretend I'm not even losing it, because that is some of the magic in stretch patterning, is that it's a little more forgiving. Then I'm going to lay my dart down, and we still have this dart under her butt cheek, so I'm going to think for 2 seconds whether I want to get rid of it or whether I want to keep it, and I think I want to get rid of it. So now I've closed up the dart in the back with tape. There's no tape shortage here. Now, what I'm going to do is I've got about, let's measure it, I've got about 1.5 inches of dart that I have to get rid of that I don't want in my costume anymore. So I'm going to divide it in half. So 1/2 inch is 3/4. So I'm going to take 3/4 of that dart out at the side seam. And the other 3/4 of it, since this dart is almost the height of my inseam, I'm going to take the other 3/4 of it away right there. Does anybody have any questions about that, what I did? So I'm getting rid of this dart, and I took it away at the side seam, and I took the other little bit of it away at the crotch. So I've bent my crotch down a little bit, but it's gonna make the exact same shape when we sew it together. Or you could leave this dart if you want to have somewhere under her butt to adjust it. Everybody's on board? Everybody's on board?
Looks like it.
Well, good. It's Tuesday. Everybody's exhausted already from the week. So I'm just going to put a little tape bridge over that dart. Okay. So this, now we have a front on the fold, and we moved the front crotch of our booty short, which is in the booty short steps. We've moved the front crotch of our booty short to the back, and we got rid of this under the butt dart. Now you could leave the dart in the back of your leotard if you wanted, and have this become yet another seam. So there's all sorts of styling you can do with leaving the darts or taking the darts away. But now we have a very basic, I would say now we have a bike unitard. Oh, unitard sounds better. A bicycle's unitard block. And I smashed out and flattened her boobs a little bit. But we're going to say that's okay for this time around. Now, what we're going to do to this is add a sleeve, and we're going to also add a really simple circle skirt to it. So I'm going to go through the steps of that next. So to add the sleeve, the first thing I'm going to do is get just a little bit of paper.
We have one question.
Yeah.
If you were going to make this men's Leo, would you do anything differently?
No. I cut this out and sell it. It's a man's costume. It's ready to go. The neck is pretty high, so you've got to remember how does he get into it. You either need to cut the neck down or put a keyhole in the back or a zipper in the back. But this pretty much is a straightforward man's costume. And what's nice about making the front on the fold is it moves the seam in the crotch kind of to the inside back of the leg on a man and a woman, and it just looks a little bit nicer. Yeah. So now, okay, so you have the leotard base, right? I'm going to show you I'm going to show you one thing on the Leo that I like to do when we're talking about armhole and sleeve. So we're leaving this with a side seam. I've got my back, I'll put a big old B, my back and my front. And you can do this same idea, you can work into other women's dance clothes, even men's tunics. Sometimes you'll see where we all know what a gusset is, which is like extra fabric on a sleeve so that they can raise their arm. You can also put a little bit of a gusset into the armhole. So what I'm going to do is tape a little extra a little extra paper in the low part of my armhole. And since it's the same color on the same color, so here's my original armhole, right? I'm going to just bump up the armhole of my leotard base about 1/2 inch, so I'm raising the side seam a little bit, and then I'm going to just blend that in to the back and the front, and that's going to make the armhole a little bit higher up in their armpit, and it's going to help. It's going to help their arm move without raising the garment. So like when somebody puts their arm in the air, you don't want their tunic or their top to shift up. The other thing that's great to know is when you take measurements, some people will measure from kind of high up in the armpit to the waist. So if you have that measurement and you know where their waist is, you can kind of figure out, you know, we reduced the vertical stretch by 8%, 0.92. So you could figure out, if you know up in their armpit to their waist, you could figure out how high up can you raise the armhole without it being too high. But just that little smidge there. So a taller person, you might put 3/4 of an inch. A shorter person, you might just put 3/8 of an inch. But raising the armpit up a little bit is going to be a good thing. And the Leo bases, as they are, have a nice armhole in them, but it's just a little bit big for something with a sleeve. So I would say if you're using the Leo base, to just raise it up just a smidge, raise up the armpit in the front and back.
I think that addresses a question about if this is just for sleeves.
Yeah. So the Leo base, if you're not having a sleeve on it, I wouldn't do this because it covers all the anatomy just right about as it is. But if you're going to add a sleeve, you want to shrink the armhole a tiny bit.
Could you explain to why they need this? Some people don't understand.
Show me.
Physics.
Yeah. So I don't have a long sleeve on, and I just threw away the sleeve I made earlier. Maybe it's still in garbage. Hang on. Let me rifle through the trash.
There's a lot in there. We've been cleaning.
I made a sleeve earlier. I guess I pitched it. So what happens on lots of clothing? It'll happen on my T-shirt. When I raise my T-shirt, do you see that the end of Nutcracker goes up in the air? We're trying to avoid that on any costume. It doesn't matter whether it's stretch or non-stretch. So there's two reasons why my N is going up. Is that I don't want to pit now. The armpit of my sleeve can move up quite a bit. So we've moved up the armpit a little bit. Oh, I'm just looking to see if it shows. So now that I've moved the armpit up, my N is moving less. It's still moving some, but it's moving much less than it was before. So by raising the armhole, that's adding a little bit of a built-in gusset. So we're not adding a seam, but we're adding a gusset. Then I'll show you later, we're going to add a gusset to the sleeve too. So what's kind of odd on dance clothes, it's fine if you end up with extra fabric under their arm because they need that for when they lift their arm up. I think that addresses that. Gusset. Same principle in pants crotches. Okay, so now we've raised the armpit a little bit, and we're gonna deal with our little. We're gonna put a little circle skirt on this, and I'll serge this together.
Before you move on, another question: how much would you add to your pattern for a zipper?
Oh, just like 3/8 of an inch at the back is enough for an invisible zipper. Then the great thing with zippers to remember is if you can put it on the person and then actually measure the length of the opening instead of just putting a zipper in it, you'll have more success. And what we usually do is we put the zipper on it, or we measure the opening on the person, mark that on the zipper, and then actually take away a little bit of the length, because it's better if the zipper is just a smidge shorter than it needs to be. Otherwise, you start to get waves down the back. And you can also stretch the Lycra a little bit and put a piece of bias cut interfacing, or there's a product called Wiggin where you're going to put your zipper in the Lycra and it'll help it roll in and sew more successfully. Okay, so I'm going to put a circle skirt on this sucker, and I'm going to put it about 3 inches, well, about 2 inches below her waist. So it's going to come out just a little bit above her hips. So I'm going to just mark 2 inches down from my waist. And I am going to cut off my trunk now, right? So I'm going to just zip off, because we're going to add a skirt into the seam instead of laying a skirt on it and folding it down. But both work. So I'm cutting off where I'm going to add a skirt. Now, since I'm making this a super simple pattern, I'm also going to put my side seam together, because I can't get enough of taping things. I'm going to put my side seam together. And now this amount that's missing here, I've got a dart and I don't want this dart in it. I'm going to just take that amount and cut it off from the back. So we are now going to have a one-piece, a very simple one-piece top on the fold. So our dart no longer exists. I moved it to the back. And you'll find the point where it gets too extreme when you move stuff so much. You'll know. You'll discover it. Like, and if my fabric had a big floral print on it or something, I might leave the dart and not make the back so curved because it'll interrupt the print a little bit less. So now I've got my front, and my neck is really big, so I'm going to just chop a little bit off of my neck so my neck isn't so huge for my little blue skating dress. It'll be Gertrude McFuzz from Seussical the Musical, if anybody knows that character. You know Gertrude McFuzz, don't you? I'm Gertrude McFuzz, and I live right next door. No?
Nope.
So now I'm going to leave my trunk with a seam in it. I'm not going to get rid of this seam in my trunk. So my trunk is ready, my top is ready, and now let's make a little bitty circle skirt. So what I'm going to do is figure out what is the hip of my top, and I'm going to use that to determine my circle skirt. My hip is 22 inches, so I measured half of it was 11. So I'm going to make a circle that's 22 inches. But the thing is, I know that even Lycra, just from making lots of outfits, the Lycra, when you cut a circle, you're cutting across the bias of the Lycra, and it's going to get a little bit bigger. So I'm actually going to make the whole of my circle skirt a smidge smaller than where it's getting sewn to my leotard. So I'm going to take away 2 inches. So I'm going to make a 20-inch circle skirt. You don't have to do that. It's just something to play with too. So whenever you cut across the bias, stuff grows a little bit. So I'm going to combat that it's growing a little bit. And that's just kind of a number I pulled out of thin air, which I told you not to do yesterday. Okay, so now we've got our top, we've got our trunk for our little blue skating dress. And if you don't have this yet, it might be we've got a few that just went in the mail, so if somebody's waiting on a circle skirt ruler, it's on the way. And Beth in London, your thing is back in the mail too. It never showed up. So the U.S. Post Office is terrible. What this is it's a rectangle, if you guys haven't seen this, with pivot points, and then it just has all the different waist or hip measurements used in there. So when I cut out my blue circle skirt, I'm going to find the 20 inches. This is product placement. I'm going to find the 20-inch spot and just cut a circle right out from my Lycra, and then I'm going to just find an arbitrary spot on my tape to cut the rest of the circle out. And I probably should make my circle at least as long as the trunk is, or if not a little bit longer, so that so here's the front of my trunk. When it's time to cut my circle out, I'm going to use the 20-inch spot. And then I'm just using this ribbon on here to decide how much longer I want to make the skirt. So I'm going to just put a mark right there. So you could make this in paper if you wanted to, but I'm going to just use the ruler and whack out a skirt.
All of you freaking out about this, it is available.
This is online.
Store.
Yeah, we just ran out of them, but our guy that makes them is cutting out more at the end of this week. So this is available
and there's different scallop rulers. And
yeah, but you can use this to make circles. What's cool too, then, if you wanted a half circle skirt for a girl with a 24-inch waist, you actually need to double it, and you would cut out a 48-inch circle. Does that make sense to everybody? So a full circle, you just find the number on here. If I've got a girl with a 24-inch waist and I want to make her a half circle skirt, I actually need to draft my half circle at 48 because we're only using half of the measurement. And you can figure it out for 3/4 also. Fun. It's time for sleeves. Then we'll come back to this. So if you haven't printed out your sleeve steps, they're in the handout section. Hi, Irma. We've been eating your chocolate all day. We've been eating chocolate all day and looking for a new space. We're trying to find a bigger shop. If you have cheap real estate in your hometown, let us know. If you don't have the instructions, they're in the handouts section, and I just emailed them to everybody. And we're going to fine-tune this like anybody who did the booty shorts the very first time. We sent another set too because we made some adjustments. It's one of those things where it's like something is second nature and clear to us because we do it all day, but it might not make sense. So we kind of take feedback and then improve it. So here's what we've got. So everybody should be looking at these on their computer or printed out. We'll just go through it and, oh good, that's great. So tilt it this way. So what we're going to be making is a sleeve. If you look to the second last page, this is your sleeve. It's just a sleeve that is smaller than the person, and then I'm going to show everybody how to add a little bit of a gusset too if they want. And let's go through the measurements that are needed, and then I just grabbed some arbitrary measurements from Houston Ballet's measurement book that we're going to draft the sleeve for. Okay, so we're just going to start with the lengths that we need, and then we're going to go through. Shh. Everett's keeping us safe and sound. There's somebody lurking in the hallway. Okay, so let's go through the measurements that we need, and I divided them into lengths, so distance up and down, and circumferences. And anybody who's messed with the booty shorts knows that you can use this same principle to pattern more than just a sleeve, right? So the measurements we need is the shoulder to wrist, and we're going to do the same amount of reduction like we did when we originally made our leotard patterns. We need the shoulder to elbow, and I always tell people to measure the shoulder from like the very top of the shoulder all the way to like where your thumb joins the wrist. That's where we like to measure the wrist. There's that little denty piece of whatever that is there, tendon. And then I always like to measure their arms like in second position if you're working with ballet girls, because your arm is longer if it's bent, or you tell people to pretend they're holding a beach ball. So we need the shoulder to wrist, oh it says bent, the shoulder to elbow. Then the other points that we have to sort out in the length of our sleeve is the shoulder to armpit, and it says this is the distance measured down from A using the chart below. So our shoulder to wrist is going to be our AE line. Our shoulder to elbow is going to be the distance from A to D. Then A to B is going to be sorted out using this chart. And the girl that arbitrary measurements I used, her shoulder to wrist is 23. And this says we're using the original measurement. So I'm going to find 23, and 23 is kind of split. You know, we've got 21 to 23 or 23 to 25. I'm going to go with the higher measurement for today. So I'm going to say that from my A to B line is going to be 4 1/8 inches. Then the other adjustment, if their arm is less than 15, over here I wrote 2 1/5. You can just put 2 or 2 1/8. I don't know why I wrote a fifth there. It's really 2 1/8, but you can round it. The other thing you'll see when we go through the measurements from my girl, and I'll do them in pen, is that if you do the math that's in here on the second page, you'll see that I just rounded things because again it's stretch and we don't have to be as precise as with a woven garment. So that's the last length up and down is C, and it's centered between B and D. And if we just look here on this next page, you'll see that we've measured A to E, A to D, A to B, and then I've just illustrated that C, line C, is right in the center of that. So the best thing as we go through this is to just look at what's new on the little diagram, just like when we did the booty shorts. Now the distances we need around the body are the arm's eye, and I'll show you on me. I've seen in some discussions where people are measuring the arm side here, that's really the bicep to me, right? Look at that. The arm's eye is actually where the cap of the garment is. So like on our leotard here, the arm's eye is where it goes highest up on the shoulder. And you want to measure that and then put a finger in there like you're putting a saddle on a horse. You don't want it like super tight, but you don't want it loose and sloppy. So that's the arm's eye. And what we're going to do with the arm's eye, this is some of those just because measurements. We're going to divide it by 6 and work that out. Then we're going to take that result, subtract it from the arm's eye. Then we're going to move that number down here and take it times 0.84, and that's going to be line 1. I know that sounds like a lot. And the leotard base, we did it times 0.88, which is 12% less around. We found that the sleeves need to be a little bit tighter, and all the girls in gymnastics and ice skating will just have you take in their sleeve continuously until they can barely get their arm in. So we just go ahead and make the sleeve a little bit tighter than the rest of the Leo already. So we're going to work this math out together. Then we're going to do their bicep original times 0.84, their elbow times 0.84, and their wrist times 0.84. And then look at my elbow here. The other thing, depending on, right, so if you don't have their elbow measurement, just draft your sleeve from the bicep to the wrist. If you don't have their bicep measurement, you can just draft your sleeve from the arm's eye to the wrist. But the more measurements you've got going up the arm, the better it'll fit. But then what's cool using your proportion dial is if you draft a really good sleeve for a couple girls, you can sort out making it longer, smaller, wider, skinnier, shorter. But on the elbow, I often measure the elbow with their arm at like kind of a 90-degree angle because it's longer this way. And you'll find in a lot of men's stuff that they're much happier if they can completely bend their elbow. So there's actually a little bit more room in there. And we measured mine earlier. It was 13 inches like this and only 11 inches around like this. So if you're measuring somebody, I would say measure both of them and then split the difference. So if I was drafting this sleeve for me, I wouldn't do 13, I wouldn't do 11, I would say that it's 12, and I'll probably come up with a better fit. And then the wrist, again, times 0.84, and a wrist's a wrist. So here we go. Let's do the math on mine. So my girl's shoulder to wrist is going to be, and you can write this in and then just reprint it if you're drafting along, or just watch, absorb, and then do it at home. Times 0.92, I rounded it to 21. My shoulder to elbow is 13 times 0.92, I rounded it to 12. The other points that I need to be figuring out is A to B. And I use the chart, so my A to B is going to be 4 1/8 inches. So my A to B is going to be 4 1/8. And then C is centered between B and D. There's nothing to measure there. Then now let's do this arm's eye one. This next set of weird math helps you figure out how wide your sleeve cap needs to be. So this next weird math is helping us figure out what the heck is going on with the cap of the sleeve. But if you follow it, you'll have a really, really good fit. So my arm's eye is 15, and I'm dividing it by 6. And you can see on the first page it's not filled in, so you can fill it in on the first page. Then I'm subtracting the above from the arm's eye. So I'm going to take 2.5 from 15, which gives me 12.5. Now I'm going to take that result. So wherever it says result, it's just referring to the measurement you just did. I'm going to take that result and take it times 0.84, and that now is finally giving me line 1, or line 1 is the width of the cap of the sleeve. If we made the width of the cap of our sleeve the same as the arm's eye measurement, it's going to get huge because we're gaining length when we do this kind of kite-shaped piece of the sleeve drafting later on. Anybody totally lost with that? Rachel's got to look. We'll pause there and then move on.
No, just come to Florida and Dover's got low taxes.
Perfect.
Oh, someone's missing the measurement sheet. That is in the handout section.
Yeah.
It underneath questions and polls. You can print that out. It says working sleeve instructions.
Do other people have the measurement sheet?
Oh, just that sheet.
Is anybody else missing the one with the chart on it?
Here.
Rachel, check real quick. No, it should be there. Just check again in the handout section. Okay, so let's start this sucker. So it's very straightforward, and the best success will be if you just follow what's written down. And I'm going to just start doing mine. And I'm going to start kind of in the middle of my paper. And I'm going to put in my A to E line, which is going to be 21. So that's the sleeve cap. A is the shoulder, if you want to write that in your notes. See, don't have that in there. Then I'm going to put in A to D, which is 12. So there's A to D. Then we'll use the chart to figure out A to B is 4 and an 8. And you'll see I haven't even really moved my ruler because I'm doing a bunch of straight lines. And then you'll remember we said C is between D and B, and it's about 8 inches. So C is going to be about 4 inches down. So we've got A, B, C, D, E. And that will take us to step 2. Put in your horizontal lines. So these are called construction lines. So we're making a sleeve block, and the lines we're adding are called construction lines. So my line 1 is my goofy number we figured out with the arm's eye, where we divided it by 6 and did all of that stuff. So line 1, if you look at the picture, it goes across B, and they're all perpendicular. So my line 1 is going to be 12 and a half. So 6 1/4 on each side. And this is good to write in. So that's line 1. Let's see, the next one, my bicep is going to be halfway between 1 and 3. So my bicep is on line C. So that's going to be 8.5.
Someone said, why is it divided by 6? The arm's eye?
That's so, right? So in pattern drafting, there's these things we call just because measurements, and that's what we have sorted out that gets you the right number to do what you need. So the divided by 6 is a just because number. And if you get a patterning book, you'll see there's all sorts of things that are just because numbers. Let's see, so I did my arm's eye. I'm going to actually do arm's eye, and then I'm going to go down to my wrist and work my way up. My wrist is 6. So remember, too, now that we're using the measurements, the second measurements. I'm not using my original wrist. I'm going to use the wrist that we sorted out, the smaller one. Question? No. Oh, wow, okay. Okay, so I got my wrist in. I've got my elbow, which is 8 1/2. And then my bicep ended up the same as my elbow, which is totally fine. Everybody's is going to be different. So I'm going to go 4 1/4. So 8 1/2. And then do the same thing here. 8 1/2. She's a little dancer. Not a tiny dancer. A little dancer. So I'm going to write in that this is line 1, 2, 3, and 4. The top A is my shoulder, and line 4 is my wrist. D is my elbow. So that's good stuff to know. We are going to move on to step 3, which is connect line 1 to points A as shown in the diagram. So we're just going from 1 up to A and back down to 1. So in different books they call this, for obvious reasons, kiting a sleeve, because the top looks like a kite. Then I'll be right back. I'm going to grab a gizmo. We love gizmos. Do you know where a buttonhole gauge is? Aha, I got it. Okay, So this, I think, is step 3 is what we're on. Connect point 1 to A as shown in the next diagram. Then you'll see small, if you look at line 1, it's got a division down the middle. So we're dividing each side of line 1 into thirds, or divide all of line 1 into sixths. And you can see down in the diagram, it's showing you that we're dividing it up into thirds. So I'm using my Baby Gate buttonhole spacer, which you can get on Amazon, to divide this into thirds. I used to use it to measure out brownies to make sure that they were all...
Did you?
I used to, yeah. When we were at the house, I would use it to measure bars and brownies. We make a lot of Lutheran bars, so, you know, you want to...
I made lemon bars.
Rachel made lemon bars this morning. So then you can divide it above, higher up. So we just want to divide this into sixths now. Oh, yeah. That's a good. So we divided that into sixths. What Rachel was just pointing out is that if you don't have a baby spacer like that, just cut a strip of paper, right? Just cut a strip of paper and rip it the width of one of your sections. This is a good way to space buttons on a shirt too. So I just made a piece of paper that's the width of my one section there, and if I just fold it into thirds, sometimes you have numbers that don't work well with rulers, whether metric or standard. And then look at that. I just mark the folds and it comes out exactly perfect. And you can use that to space hooks and bars and buttons. Cool. Thanks,
Cool.
Rachel.
You're welcome.
Now, okay, now we got to read step 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to create the sleeve cap, and there's a lot going on here, but if you just look at the pictures, it will help. Following the visuals in the diagram, draw a faint horizontal line as shown to the left. So you can see in the picture that my inner 2 lines here have a faint horizontal line going across them. So I'm gonna just do it dashed with the Sharpie so that it shows up. So I'm putting a dashed or a faint line across that section. Now I think here's the hardest part of making this sucker. Let's read the next part of step 4. We're going to mark points F and G. F is halfway down from A, the distance between A and the new horizontal line. So what this little chunk is telling you is to measure this distance from A, the shoulder, and how far down is that, this new line we just made. And F, and you can see which line F is on. F is on the line 1 to the left of A, and it's halfway down. So if we take and imagine that the A is also a horizontal line, and maybe that's what you want to do to sort this out, that look on the diagram where F is placed, so that's an inch. I'm going to come down halfway and make a mark. That's going to be F. Then it says G is opposite that and only down a quarter. So this is going to be my G spot. You knew I was going to say that, no? So now we have the F is down halfway and G is down only a quarter. And the reasoning is G is higher up because we want more room at the back of the sleeve. So by raising G, it gives a little more range of motion for the arm to move forward. So you can go ahead, now that you've got the shoulder written in, you can write B for back and C, or C for front. Back and front, so the front is the left side of your sleeve. Did I lose anybody on step 4?
Hold up.
Hold up.
How did you determine where to draw the faint horizontal line?
Yes, so the faint horizontal line, if you look directly left of the number 4, it intersects the lines, the inner lines when we divided this into thirds. So if you just repeat, I'll hold this one up close. So really you're just repeating what's right here. So we divided it into thirds, well, sixths or thirds in step 3. Then this line goes right across wherever these spots intersect the kite line. Yeah, and it's one of those things, again, that's just because. It's just because it works. But there's math behind a lot of it. So now you can see here, down here, you can see that we've got those two spots marked nice and clear. Okay, so now we're going to go to step 5, and it's another horizontal line just like we did in step 4. So you'll see there's two spots marked H and J. There where this outer third intersects the kite. So we're going to put another faint horizontal line from H to J. There's no I because it looks like a dash. There's no I. There's something else that I skipped the I in because it doesn't look like a letter. So now we have points H and J. Okay. Now we're going to create the sleeve cap in step 6. The thing to know about that is you have outside curves. So the cap of your sleeve. Oh yeah. So the cap from H to F to the shoulder is an outside curve. Then the underarm is the reverse, is an inside curve. So on your back, you'll have an inside curve at the armpit and an outside curve. And then on the front, the cap, you'll have an outside curve and then an inside curve. And I always think kind of about like, can I get the ruler to rotate? Is there a spot where I can get the ruler to twist to get both? And if there isn't, don't worry about it. You just blend it together. And this ruler is a bit big for how small this girl is. So I'm going to connect, we'll start in the front. I'm going to connect H to F to A. And if your ruler doesn't hit all the points, it's all right. Just get kind of close. So I'm going to connect that. Basil's still around. We got 2 dogs.
He's under the table.
Oh, okay. Then I'm going to flip the ruler from my armpit. Now we're going to do the other back. So G is higher up, so you'll see that the cap in the back has more room than the cap in the front on purpose. And then we'll do the other part here. So that's kind of what your cap looks like. So when you fold it in half, hopefully there's more on the back of your sleeve than the front of your sleeve. This looks like I know what I'm doing. So now we're gonna connect the out seam or the inseam, the underarm seam of the sleeve. So I'm gonna just take a larger curve, and I'm gonna see what I can get to touch with my larger curve, and it's really nothing. So I'm gonna just start bending my ruler so that I can connect all of these points. And you don't want any peaks in there. So if you end up with peaks in any spot, you can soften them. You know, just kind of split the difference. So we're winding up with a pretty good ballerina looking sleeve. Now, depending on their bicep, their elbow, their wrist, your shape is going to be different. But if you've got good measurements, you'll end up with a pretty successful sleeve. So we have a sleeve. Oh my gosh. Now we're going to put a gusset in it. So I'll let you zoom in here in a second for the gusset. Let's read through it first. So everybody's on board with the sleeve. How cool is that? If you have any measurements, you can use this for all time.
Is the outward curve of the sleeve because of the stretch?
No, I just know, so this, I think you're talking about this curve here. I just know that I'm not necessarily like the fatty part of an arm. It doesn't just go straight from your elbow to the wrist. So I put a little bit of curve in there because if you look at my forearm, it actually goes out a smidge from my elbow, but not everybody's does. So I'm just assuming that this ballerina and I have a lot in common. But you can see it there. From the elbow, it goes out a little bit and then back in. But again, this is stretch stuff. you could totally just make this a straight line and it'll fit just fine. But I think having a few curves in a few spots helps the sleeve stay on that part of their arm rather than crawling up. I like to explain stuff. Okay, let's do the gusset. Look at your picture next to number 8, and I'm going to get a flexible ruler really quick because it helps demonstrate this well. Flexible ruler. I thought I had one over here. Right? Everybody's bought one of these at the office store and they don't know what to do with it. It's a ruler that's flexible. The thing to remember with the flexi ruler is that 0 isn't at the end. I've seen some disasters because people put this as 0, not wherever 0 actually is. Right? We don't want to mess that up. So I wrote in the instructions to just add 2 alphabetical points, K and L. So I'm just to help illustrate this. So I'm going to put K is this corner right there, and L is the corner opposite. So it says to add K and L. That's because we want to measure the space from J to L, the curve. So we don't care about the kite line anymore, right? Because now we actually have our stitching line. We want to measure this space and this space. What happens when some folks put gussets in, a built-in gusset like this, is they raise the armpit up and they raise it straight above this point. Then what's happened is you've shrunk the sleeve cap. The point of the gusset is actually going to be out here somewhere. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 0 of my ruler, and you'll see, oh, here's the next thing I need to fix on the directions. It'll help if you can see this, right? This is that line, and then this line that we're going to go up to is the line that intersects H and J, which you already have. So I'm going to use my flexible ruler, and I'm going to hold it along the curve, and I can see that's 2.5 inches. So now I'm going to push this up and find my 0, and then blend in a little bit of a gusset shape. So see, had I just gone straight up from K, I'm going to end up shrinking my sleeve about 1 inch, and it's going to be too small. So now I'm going to just take the curved ruler and blend that little bit of gusset back into the sleeve. And even if you're making the underarm a smidge bigger, it's all right. It's going to be better to have something to take in a fitting than to not have enough fabric. Now we'll do the same on the other side. What was that sound? We had a rumble. So I'm putting the 0 at L, and I'm figuring out where do I want to raise this up to. I'm going to mark my 0. And then I'm going to use a curved ruler to kind of blend that back in. So it looks weird, but it's going to fit really nice, I promise. So there's a sleeve. Does anybody have questions about what we just did? No? We're going to move on. No. So on the last page, it's totally wasted paper. It says the left of the sleeve is the front, the right is the back. Add a 1/4 inch seam allowance everywhere except if you want to adjust the wrist, add more at the wrist. When you're at this point, you can even turn your sleeve into one of these things that we really like, where you make a little bit of a loop for a finger. So we're going to make this sleeve. Shunk, shunk. So now I'm going to cut this sucker out with a 1/4 inch all the way around it. And then we're going to make our quick skating dress, and then we're going to do something with gores. So while I'm cutting is a good time to go to the bathroom, sell that stock that you're sitting on, or ask questions. No questions.
No questions.
Guys are so quiet. I promise I'll cut the costume out faster.
Do you need interns this summer?
Well, we might. I don't know. Who's asking? Send us your resume and portfolio and a stitched garment.
How's the weather here today? It's cooler.
It's kind of cold outside.
It's sunny though.
I think I'm going to just make one sleeve for my little skating dress. Let's see. Should I make the skirt light and the top dark? I don't know. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so I'm going to cut out my top first. And oh, you know what? I'm going to cut out my trunk to match my skirt because that's nice, right?
Someone's asking about why you put a point to the wrist.
Oh, do you ever see stuff where the sleeve comes down and it has a little finger loop? We just do that because it instead of this color just ending, it kind of lets the color dissolve. And we just finished a show with like 30 unitards that all have that. I like them. So I'm just lining up my fabric here. I'm going to cut out my top and my sleeve from this. So, and if you remember earlier, we moved this dart from the side to the back. So even though you can see a dart in the paper here, I'm not actually going to make a dart. And at the bottom, I'm going to just kind of eyeball like a 1/4 inch all the way around this, since we're going to lose some height because it's going to get a skirt stuck on it. And we've already started making, but need to edit. We're going to make a video free for everyone forever showing a great way to make skinny straps on leotards and how to make the binding of your neck work into the strap so that you don't have all sorts of lumpy intersections. How does that sound? A freebie. And I think it'll be easier to edit it together than to try to explain it, because there's a few steps.
Everyone's excited about it.
Good, good. Okay, so I've got my front and back. How easy is that? Now I'm going to cut out my sleeve. And then we're going to cut out the shorts and the skirt and serge it together really fast.
Nice weight.
Right. We have nice weights. It's, I'm too lazy. So again, your sleeve will be shaped differently depending on who it's for. And so another thing to think about is, right, so there's the amount of reduction. So if you make up the first sleeve and you go, gosh, Travis, I think it's a little loose, just change your 0.84 maybe to 0.8 and see what happens. Or if you say, gosh, it's a bit tight, change that 0.84 maybe to 0.88 again. So then once you're satisfied with it, you're adjusting the system to work for what you like.
How far down did you make your point for the finger?
Oh, I just went like 1 3/4 inches. That's good for a ballerina. If it's a kid, maybe only go down 1 inch. But you know, you've got quite a bit of real estate on a hand. You could cut it really pointy. It just kind of depends on the style you want. So I've got my sleeve, my front, and my back. Now I'm going to cut out my short and my skirt. And I'm doing this skirt in Lycra because it's a modest skating dress.
How would you adjust for a mesh sleeve?
So, right, okay, let's talk about that. The mesh is stretchier around than it is up and down, but the up and down is similar. So for a mesh sleeve, what I would say is the first time, make your reduction greater, make one up and put it on a kid's arm and see if you like the tightness. So the reduction on a mesh would be greater than 0.84. I'm imagining it would be almost like 80% of the original. So that would be 0.8, right? So looser fabric needs to be tighter, and tighter fabric needs to be looser. Well, it sounds like a proverb, right? I'm cutting my back out kind of weird just to save some fabric.
What is your opinion about more or fewer design lines? Darts seem to create a slimmer look.
I love darts. Basically, I find it's more impressive to have something that fits really well For a while, I used to try to get as few seams as possible, and the fit isn't as good. So it's just kind of one of those, you know, if your design is like a Mondrian, is that how you say it? Mondrian top, right, with different squares and checkers and shapes, move your darts around to help accommodate your design. Like you could do a top full of squares without having darts because you move the darts to the squares. But if it's just a solid color thing, you know, figure out what's the fewest amount of seams you can have where the fit is still good or where you still have something to adjust the fit. So I've got to remember to slit my crotch open because the crotch is on the fold of this. I've got my front, my sleeve, my short. Don't worry, the dance dress will be more fun and more challenging for everybody to make notes. Grab your cell phones and take pictures of it as we go. Oh, do I have enough to cut a skirt out of this?
You have other colors.
Yeah.
Just make a train wreck.
Let's see. I'm going to find out here really quick. I thought it was wider. I need this much room. I have just enough. Okay, so I'm going to use this handy dandy ruler to cut out my circle skirt here. And I need to straighten, square up my fabric a little more. Good enough. So I need a pin. What did I say it was? I wrote it down on my pattern. My skirt needs to be, it was 22-inch hole, so I'm going to actually make a 20-inch hole so that it's a little bit snug. 20, actually, I'm going to do it 21 because I've got that spot marked on here. And I can't get quite to my original hem, so I'm going to just scoot it in a tiny bit. But before I start cutting, I'm going to make sure that I actually have enough room to do it. And the first thing I'm going to mark is my hem edge. Mark it with the Sharpie and then just cut off the Sharpie. Oh, I don't quite have enough. I'm close. My skirt's going to be close, you guys. It's not going to be amazing. You know what? Yeah, it's going to be fine. Nobody's wearing this. You'll forgive me. Now, my Sharpie doesn't fit inside my next measurement, so I'm going to use a pen. So does the pen not fit either? Real good sales pitch here. So now I'm just going to mark some dots to connect my waist hole. And my waist I'm making a little bit smaller than the waist on the top. And then we're going to serge this sucker together. Voila. Put a weight on it. There we go. Watch your fingers. Dull blades cut hands off. This one's nice and sharp.
Sharp ones do too.
Sharp ones do too. Then I'm going to just give myself a little dot for my center front and center back, and I'm going to just stretch the rest out. So, to the serger, another good moment for question asking. Oh, look at Basil. Show him Basil. He's a little angel. The dogs are asleep. I might bump you. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is make my short and then put the skirt on it. And you can do, everybody kind of has a different order that they like to do this stuff. So if you've already got something that works for you, don't change it. So I'm going to put my back crotch together. And again, we use the booty short pattern, which I just love. We've made it in all sorts of sizes for men and women, and it seems to just kind of work on everybody. Is that my back? I think that's the back. That's my back. Now I'm going to put my front sides on. So the front, remember I slit the crotch. So I'm going to put the front on. I hope everybody makes 8 leotards tonight before they go to bed. And again, I'm matching my edges and then just using my hands to line everything up because it's going to be more successful than pins. I'll put my other side seam together. And yeah. I'm actually, when I put my skirt to the top of this, I'm going to stretch it and use a straight stitch on the home sewing machine because I wouldn't want to serge it on and then serge the top on. It's going to get really thick with all the thread. So I've got my back crotch, my side seams. Now I will put my front crotch together. If I can figure it out. With the front on the fold too, I find it's better to have the back on the underside when I'm serging it because I feel like I have a little more control making that horrendous corner. And you can serge off just a little bit. So here's my back crotch. When I serge this, I cut off about 3/8 of an inch, and so that it's easier to bend it around the corner. And on your shorts pattern, there's a step called walking it together. So you want to actually like lay your back crotch to your front crotch and make sure they match and then split the difference. I didn't on mine, so I just pieced them together. So in a minute, we'll put the skirt on the short. So we've got our short made, and then our skirt is going to go over the top of that here in a minute. But let me serge my top and my sleeve together since I'm at the serger. My top has a center back seam, so I'm going to put the center back seam in. Bless you.
Thank you.
And then, like when you're in the process of binding things and finishing edges and all that stuff, oh, I didn't put my shoulders together; they don't really match. It's a good idea to think about where you're going to end the binding and stuff. Think about that. My neck doesn't match because I did this quickly. Don't judge. Think about where the lump of your binding is. You know that you don't want it really all piled up on the shoulder or all in their armpit. I always like to kind of offset it from the shoulder and the back for the neck and the armhole if you're binding them. Okay, so now we're going to put the sleeve on. The seam is the back of my costume, and I'm going to start by serging my underarm together. Ooh, I got excited there, went a little drunk. Sometimes you need a little spit on your fingers. Now, my leotard body pattern doesn't have an underarm, but I do have a shoulder. So I'm going to figure out this is my right sleeve. So I'm going to put this in the right side, and I'm going to match the shoulder because that's what I've got. So I'm matching the shoulder on here. So here's another good little bit of info. If your sleeve just matches or if it's really close, you're really good to go. If your sleeve in stretch stuff is considerably bigger than the armhole of your leotard, you might want to reduce the cap, the width of the cap of your sleeve a little bit. The other thing that's good with these Leo bases, right, is if you have the arm's eye of your person and measure the arm's eye of your leotard base, split the difference. So if your Leo base sleeve you know, say the leotard armhole is 23 and your girl's sleeve, her arm's eye is 18, find some number in the middle, and if you draft your sleeve in the middle of those numbers, you'll have a better fit. When in doubt, split the difference. So now, see, I've got this extra bit. That's all right. That's my gusset. I actually want to fit that down into there so that there's some more fabric under her arm. Right. Now I'm going to sew the short onto the skirt over here at the sewing machine. Do you have enough room? I'll get another chair.
In my questions, maybe.
Yes, read some questions. Nobody needs to see this stuff.
I'm still gonna put it on you.
Okay. Questions.
Okay. Have you had issues with performers complaining about surge or bulk in the crotch with this pattern?
No, none at all. They're usually happy that there isn't a seam running right down the front.
I've had issues with fabric bleeding onto each other when Leo fabrics are mixed. Others have also suffered this way, and I did pre-wash. Any hints to avoid this?
Pre-wash it with Synthropol, which is a product available at Dharma Trading Company, which sells dyes. It's Synthropol, T-H-R-O-P something, Synthropol. Wash whatever you can in Synthropol if you're worried about it bleeding. The more you know. I didn't mean to yell Synthropol, it's just I was sewing. And sometimes when you wash stuff, like I know at the theater when they have stuff with different colors, they'll put a few towels in with the wash so that the color that bleeds out hopefully will transfer onto the towel instead of a different part of your garment. And also, if you're pre-washing Lycra, dry it relatively hot, because if you don't dry it hot, the color that wasn't set in there still won't be set. So I'm using a straight stitch to base this on, and I'm pulling the heck out of it because I want to make sure that it's nice and stretchy. My challenge will be putting the front on the front of the short. I've made many of these where I have it backwards. Okay, time to connect the front.
Hold on, I think there's
a question. Oh
no, you already answered it.
Yeah, let's go. Am I going to catch your core? We're dancing so that we can get by the machines. So now that I'm going to jinx myself, I've got to look in here and make sure that I have the back in the back and the front in the front. And I am going to flip my skirt over the top. Actually, I'm going to flip the top over the skirt. So I'm going to turn my top inside out so that I can put the top to the skirt, right sides together. And I've got a seam in the back that's easy to match up so that I'm actually going to start in the near the front so that I can make sure I'm stretching everything nice and even the whole way around. But my short and top were cut from the same thing, so it should fit perfectly. So I'm going to lay this down. And then the straight stitch that I put in there, I stretched it enough it can just stay, or if you want, you're welcome to rip out that straight stitch. Here's my okay, okay. It's a little bit to manage, but some people too, when they cut this stuff in the shop, they will add like a ½ inch or an inch seam allowance to the top of the trunk. So should you actually need to make something longer, you have somewhere to do it instead of serging it together right away. But for class, we're just going to serge it together. How's our time? What time is it?
6:48.
Oh, we're going to get to dance. We're going to get to gored skirts in just a second, but we're going to just do a front so that you guys can see all the idea behind it. Okay, we're going to put this on the dress floor. The dogs just aren't interested in what we're doing at all.
They never are.
Understand it.
Unimpressed.
So now, she definitely needs some binding and stuff, but if we give it a little twist here, I'm going to imagine that there's
someone said that Dharma's brand of wash is as good as Synthrapol and it's not as expensive.
Oh, good. Well, that's great. Is it just like a pre-wash or something? Who knows? But hey, check it out. So we've got a really simple top with a bike short in it, and the bike short is holding our skirt on. She needs some binding around her neck, but all in all, it fits pretty good. And she's got her sleeve, and you can see in here when I let the sleeve fall that there is extra fabric jammed up, like the sleeve wants to go up higher into the armpit. That's a good thing because that's going to let her raise her whole arm without raising any of this other stuff up. And the other thing you would want to do is go in here and see which way the serging lays more attractive, whether it should be top stitched under the skirt, which makes a bump under the skirt, or whether you want to fold it up and top stitch it up. The other thing you can do is make this all one piece. Just lay the skirt to it and let the skirt fall down. Yeah, and I want to show you something I should have done on the neck that we talked about yesterday.
Do you always cut the pattern in pieces, top to bottom, to add a skirt? Would you ever sew the skirt onto a Leo without a seam there?
I like to put the seam there because I think it looks nice. It's easier to sew and have it end up more successful. Sometimes when it folds down, it doesn't look, you know, when it folds down and they're moving, it doesn't look as made.
And how would you attach a skirt that doesn't close in the front?
A skirt
like
that
open.
doesn't close in the front.
Like that's open in the front.
Oh, that one you wouldn't put a seam here, and then you would just fold the skirt up towards her body and stitch it around wherever you want it and let it fall down.
For the skirt, do you ever add more to the length at the back so it's level?
Yeah, you can add more to the back, or you can dip the back of this down, and actually the back of this trunk has a little bit of extra room in it for the butt, so the trunk is letting the back be level. That makes sense.
It makes sense.
Yeah, but it's always good to dip the back like another inch or 3/4 of an inch, or dip the back of your seam if you're seaming it together. Just put it a little lower on her butt because that looks nice.
Do you use gussets a lot for dance or lycra costumes? I've only heard of them for classical ballet.
Well, I build in a gusset wherever I can because I know that I can. That I don't know. Yes, I mean it's even though on your pattern it doesn't look like, if I put the pattern this way, it doesn't look like there's a gusset added to it, right? It's added in there. So yeah, I put a little bit of gusset in lots of times because you can always serge it out. You can always come in here, pin it, and take it away. Where if she couldn't raise her arm, it would look pretty awful to add the gusset later. And then again, everybody's tightness desire is different. So if you think the sleeve is tight or loose, adjust that number, the 0.84, make it a little smaller, a little larger. I want to show you something on the neck. So see how I've got this little bit of neck that's standing away here? Do you remember yesterday when we put a couple cuts in to our mesh? I should have done the same thing into my neck. So to get rid of this little pillow that's sticking out, here, show down here, right? So we've got a little extra in the neck. what I should have done is take away a little bit from that neck edge and a little bit more from that neck edge to tighten it up before it's even sewn. Because if it's made well, it should fit pretty good even before the binding. And I could do the same thing on my back neck. Put a couple slices into it and take away some of the distance so that the neck edge tightens up. And that just makes it a little more fancy, like it's a Chanel leotard instead of a Travis Halsey leotard. Yeah, so we're going to move on to gores. And I'm going to just make a front of something with gores so that you guys can see the idea behind it. I think that sounds like the best plan. So ask a few questions. And I'm going to just use the same kind of shape that we made and use that to turn it into my gored dress, since we've already got a leotard going. Actually, what I'm going to do is retrace my front and back. So you can add gores anywhere, whether there's seams and darts or not seams and darts. So you could leave the seams in the sides of this and create the same kind of look with gores. But let me just clean up my pattern here by cutting a new one out really fast. Everybody watching along? Anybody on Amazon?
Nobody.
Nobody. Oh,
everyone's paying attention.
You guys get the most gold stars of any group we've had yet. You know who you are. All right. So I'm going to just use this really simple shape again for my front. And I'm going to use a tracing wheel and mark where my waist is. So when you start adding a skirt in, it's good to know where the waist is so that you have some sort of reference. So we're going to make an imaginary skirt that is longer in the back and shorter in the front considerably. So we're going to make a teardrop skirt. So I've got the same thing. I've got my front and my back. My back is on the left. And I am going to imagine where my side seam is. So I've got a front, back, and a side. This I'll kind of show you, and then we will back up and look at it again. So I'm going to just make it pretty simple. I'm going to put 3 gores in the front and 3 gores in the back. So where this would be, if we made it the whole thing up, it would have 12 gores, okay? But I'm going to just work on half. So I'm going to first, instead of using a measuring tape, I'm going to just divide my front waist into thirds, kind of, and my back waist into thirds. Everybody knows what we mean when we say gores, right? Don't worry, we won't say your name out loud.
Nope.
Everybody knows?
No, they don't.
Oh, goodness. A gore is a panel in a bodice or skirt that adds fullness at the bottom. Here, I'll draw a picture. Pictures are good. So when you have your Victorian lady, right, there's her fabulous belt. When you think of her skirt, the front is a gore, and it's usually flatter, and then they get more gathered, and they get fuller and fuller and fuller as you go around to the back. So any of these seams are actually gores. So this seam to this seam is a gore. Then a godet is when you have 2 gores. I know somebody's dying to know this one. When you have 2 gores that have an extra piece of fabric inserted in them, that's a godet, where you force like a half circle or a quarter of circle in between 2 seams. So that's a godet.
Someone's commenting that they tried to do this with a vintage pattern, and it was hard to get them to lie flat. Do you have tips to make them disappear at the top?
To say again, to be flat in the top, or that it was scrunching up their body?
It was hard to get them to lie flat. How do you make them disappear at the top point?
In a Victorian skirt like this?
Yes. A vintage pattern, they said. I don't know.
Well, the one trick between a vintage pattern and now humans is the vintage pattern is too small around, but your gores will lie flatter depending on what's happening with the bias. So if this was a Victorian, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but this might be helpful. If they're not disappearing, it might be that something is standing away. So in a lot of old skirts, this piece is straight. You have a seam that's on the straight of grain, and then the bias of your next piece is anchored to the straight piece so that it doesn't grow at the hem. That's one thing that'll help your seams lay nice, is cutting it straight to bias to straight to bias. The other thing is, if you're trying to get the seams to disappear, like visually, it might also be the fabric. Like depending on the weave of your fabric, sometimes when you cut certain angles, it shows up. I don't know if I understood your question.
Makes sense.
Makes sense? Okay. So we're going to do a little top that looks kind of like this since I'm drawing now. So we've got our little, it's going to be similar to the little blue dress we just made, right? Super simple armholes with the top. And we're going to make 3 gores across the front on each side. So we're going to make something like that. So here's our waist. So our inside is just going to be lycra with the lycra trunk thin. So we've got lycra with a lycra trunk on the inside. Then, and we would get rid of the seam, so we don't need a seam in the waist. Then what I'm going to be showing you next is how do you take this info from the top of your costume and work it into fullness that comes out around, and I'm going to show you how to make it longer at the back to make a teardrop kind of shape. It's a terrible drawing, but the idea is there. So here's what we're going to do. I divided my waist into thirds, and because I like curved lines more than straight lines, I'm going to take a curved ruler, and I'm going to just, so we're not really cutting the inside thing with all these seams. We're going to say the inside is one color, but you can do whatever you want. You know, this is just the idea behind this. And then here's my back pieces. They're a little weird looking, but I'm going to be artsy, and I'm going to go with the weird looking shape. And I don't like where my other seam is, so I'm going to lower it. Okay, so what I have now is the start of my gores that go up to the neck. You can have gores that just start at the waist or the hip or wherever you want, but I'm doing big, long, swoopy gores. Swoopy gores. Then while you've got this, so think of this as your road map. The next thing you're going to do, so we're going to be adding all these seams to mesh. The next step is to figure out how long you want each piece to be. So if I wanted the front of her skirt to be 10 inches long, and I wanted the back of her dress to be 18 inches long, and I want it to be even at the side, I'm going to mark the what's between 10 and 18 is 14. So I want my side to be 14. So this is a good place to start, actually. So either side of my side seam, my skirt needs to be 14 inches long, right? Either side of my center back, 18. My front, we're going to cut it on the fold. It's just going to be 10 inches in the front. Then 10, 11, 12, doesn't quite fit. So 10, 11, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 12 to 13, 13 to 14. So 10, so I need to divide 4 by 3. Is that what it is? It's late in the day. Has anybody figured this out at home? 4, like 1 1/3. So this is going to be 10. This is going to be like 11 3/8-ish. Let's just say it's 11 1/2. The other side of this seam is going to be 11 1/2. And then what's between 11 1/2 and 14? I already know it in my head, but check this out. An easy way to do some of this other weird math is to just find the 2 things you're dividing on your tape measure and fold them in half. And it says it's 12 3/4. Is that what it is? 12 3/4. Who knows? you're judging me at home, and that's just fine. So then let's make this 14. Let's make this 15 and a half. So does everybody see what I'm doing? That both sides of a seam need to be dealt with. 15 and a half to 18. It's going to be 16 3/4. It's close enough. We're going to say this is 16 3/4. Okay, now I'm gonna work on just the back of this costume. So I'm going to separate my side seam, and now through the rest of class we're going to just focus on the back. So the first thing I'm going to do is give myself some way to hook this sucker together later. So I'm going to give myself 2 notches at that seam, and I'm going to give myself a single notch at this seam. Now we're going to talk about the swing of your skirt. So I'm going to line my costume with this same piece. So before I cut this up, I need to cut out another one, because that is going to be the lining or the lycra part of my dress. So this dress is going to have mesh gores with a lycra inside. The guts are lycra, the outside's mesh. Okay, so now I've got my lining, which I want. Oh, I kind of ran out of paper. So now I have my center back on my lining piece. I'm going to put that away. And the next thing I'm going to do now is separate my gores. So this doesn't have to go all the way up to the neck. You could start this process right at the waist or right at the high hip, whatever you want. Okay. So now I'm going to take these pieces and just tape them onto some paper. I suppose I shouldn't work upside down. I'm not going to work upside down. So I've got 14 and 15 inches that I want to get to here. So I need to make sure that I'm taping. So from my waist down, I want this to be 14 inches at my side seam. So I'm just making sure that I'm giving myself enough room. So we're going to be talking about swing here in a second. Swing is how full the skirt is, right? So now I'm going to just perpendicular from my waist, I'm going to just make some basic rectangles. This is going to be 14. My back is going to be 15 and a half. So this, right, this is too narrow for a skirt, but this is the easiest way we can make a skirt. So I've marked the length that we decided for each piece. Okay? I'm going to do my next one. And it's going to be 15 and a half and 16 3/4. I didn't give myself enough paper, did I? It's going to be 15 and a half and 16 and a half, because that's how much room I've got. So then I'm going to adjust this. This next one's going to be 16 and a half. Oh, need more room. Everybody's kind of on board so far. Instead of taking the hard way to figure this out, I'm showing you the easiest way, and I use it myself all the time. So this angle at the bottom is what's going to help me sort out what's going on with my hem. Now I'm going to cut this out. I have a tickle in my throat. I need to cough here in a second. Okay, so now I'm going to cut this out. So remember, we're just working on the back. So on the front, we would cut the front out just the same and figure out how long different pieces are going to be. And this little bit that I've taped on is all I need at the bottom. So now I have this big long strip for my side. This next piece would be my middle back. So this, and you can do the same thing and make an asymmetrical skirt. So if you want it high on the right thigh and low on the left thigh, you'd actually need to make your entire leotard going across instead of just half. You would need to draft the right and the left instead of just one or the other. Because that's, oh, look, see what I did there? I actually need to bring this to here. Whoops, whoops, whoops. Does everybody see where my mistake was? I didn't go far enough out. here's where my mistake was. I didn't come out, my rectangle needs to come out from the widest part of my garment, or where it's joining in the rest of my garment. This is called splitting the T in some patterning books, and you'll see why in moments. Okay. Any questions yet? This is where it gets really, really fun and kind of cool. So now we've got our side, our middle back, and our back going on that we're going to make flare out. So the first thing that we're going to decide is, do we want more flare at the back and less flare at the side? I say, heck yes. So I'm going to mark, now I'm going to mark in what my flare is going to be. So let me do one piece so you kind of see the idea. So this part of my pattern is where it fits her hip, right? So this is where it fit the hip on the blue leotard that we made initially. I'm going to split my first T. So I'm going to go up the center of this piece that we added. And where my hip is, this is where the fullness is going to start. I'm going to split across that, like the letter T. So now, here's where you start to get volume in your skirt pieces. So we imagine that this now is all filled in with paper, and that this is now fullness in the skirt. Are there some ahas? Ahas?
Yes.
Okay, so now I said I want to make more fullness at the back than I did in the front. And this is one of those things to just play with. So I'm going to make my side seams at the bottom of where I split this open. So we cut a T. I'm going to add 5 inches in at my hem. And I'm not going to take the time to tape paper in between here, so I'm going to just make a tape bridge. So I've added 5 inches in between the sides, so this is my side back. Then on my middle back, I'm going to add 7 inches, and then I'm going to add 9 inches so that it gets fuller as it goes from the side to the back. So in your front panels, you might just add 3 inches, 2 inches, 1 inches to make the front really flat and the back really full. But this is another one of those places where I would say use your common sense and your instinct, because if you're not flaring this out enough to even fit over the full part of her butt, you've got to add more flare.
At what point would you reduce the pattern for mesh fabric?
Here I wouldn't really. If you've got all these seams in here, and if this is mesh and it's going over lycra, the lycra is going to be tighter no matter what, and the mesh will just kind of lay over it. If it looks like your mesh is a bit spongy or a bit full, then maybe just add seam allowance on one side of each of these instead of both sides to make it just a smidge tighter. See, I'm really good at the non-committal answers, you guys. So that, so I added 7 inches to the bottom of my split on that one. And this tape dispenser. Then my center back, I'm going to add 9 inches. The best is, and it's what we always do, make a sample and see what happens. Right? That's the only way to absolutely know. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to split up that.
Do you redraw the hem or eyeball it when cutting it out?
You just split the difference. So you're filling in the space from this point to this point. So this, you would just kind of curve from this point until you can get to that point. You guys have lots of good questions. That's good. So now I'm adding even more fullness, but I want to make sure that it's kind of balanced. I don't want all of it on one side or all of it on the other side. I'm kind of trying to center my fullness. Then, actually, before I cut this out, I'll quickly show you the principle then behind making a tulipped edge skirt. A tulipped edge skirt is where there's fullness, and then as the fullness continues down their body, it gets even fuller. So I'll show you if I was making a tulip edge skirt. So what's cool then, right? So if I wanted to make this tulipy so that it's full and then gets even fuller, say on the bottom third or fourth, you would just split another split. Actually, why don't we just do that on this one? So if I put a split there and cut into it so it's free, and bend this out some amount of inches that I'm going to measure. If I bend that out 4 inches, oh, will you add parking? Rachel's adding parking. So we're going to make this seam tulip. So I'm going to come up the same distance up this next side, split into that, and if I fan this out the same width, because I want my tulip to be balanced, if I fan that out, now we have a tuliped hem. And what's cool with the tuliped hem is you can, this point doesn't have to be the same all the way around your skirt. You can have a low tulip at the sides and then split the back even higher up and make the back even fuller. Why don't I just do that? And then I'm going to cut it out of mesh. And we can imagine what the lycra looks like, so I'm not even worried about that.
Everyone's excited about this.
Oh, good. This is how you make dance dresses. And this same principle, though, a Victorian walking skirt, you can pattern the same way, and you can do, they often have this like little tulip edge. Okay, now we need lots of room on the table. I think we're not even, I think we're going to just come out just right. Look at that there. Now there's enough room. And I think I will use hot pink. Because why not? It shows up on camera. So I'm going to still do my most stretch around. But I'm going to cut these out quick and dirty so that we can get them put together. Actually. So I'm going to just eyeball my seam allowance for time saving's sake. So I want to turn this way. Cut nicer at home than I am right now. I just want to be able to show you guys how great this looks. So I've got my middle back. And I'm going to just cut my hem right on the hem, and I'm going to blend my edges together that need blended. I'm going to add 1/4 inch to there, and I actually better mark my notches or I'm not going to know what's going on.
Do you want to quick explain again how that's different than a godet?
Yeah, a godet is where a piece of fabric is inset in between 2 seams to add fullness. So if you think of bell-bottom jeans, the inset, if you have inset jeans, that's a godet. So we cut that piece out.
How would you finish your skirt edge? Would you make it lettuced or leave it unfinished?
The mesh, I like to just cut it and leave it because it looks really, really nice. Or if you want it lettucey, so lettuce is when it goes like this, you can make a really tight narrow stitch or a 3-needle rolled hem stitch on your serger, and then that will make a nice lettucey edge. You can even make it quinceanera style and put in fishing line. You can serge in fishing line, and that's a great way to make ruffles, like in a Spanish dress, or if you need a really full petticoat, you can serge in fishing line. And I've seen stretch dresses with the fishing line added in. So I'm going to mark my notches again because I don't know for sure that I'll be able to put this together.
How do you serge in fishing line?
You just serge in fishing line. You just lay it inside the stitching when you start and step on the gas. And you'll know if you cut the fishing line. And if you're putting fishing line in, you want a tight, narrow stitch so that the fishing line doesn't poke itself out and get caught, because it's a good way to snag a man. That's good advice. Use fishing line to snag a man. Oh, this is going to be so pretty, you guys. I can tell already.
Will you serge the seams of the mesh with 4 threads or use a more narrow serge?
I like to see, if I'm putting this many seams in something, I want people to be impressed by it, and I don't want it to fall apart. So generally, 4 threads.
Also a good joke, how to snag a man.
How to snag a man. Okay, I'm going to put my 3 gores together, and then we will look at it on the dress form. Let's see if I can figure out how they go. Yeah, I gotta let Rachel out first. So we're just using the plain flat lycra bit underneath. We're not doing anything fancy with the lycra on this sucker. And I would say everybody should look at our Halsey Onstage Facebook page and look at some of the past projects from the different spandex classes, and you'll see this used in a few different ways. It's easier to visualize it. You can also use this to make a bubbled skirt, so you can cut an overskirt that is longer and an underskirt that is considerably shorter and stitch them together at the hem, and it makes a bubble. And you can even make a bubble skirt with a twist, where you make an overskirt and an underskirt and then offset them by like a half by like half. Bubble skirts are fun. We just made a bubble skirt out with pasta. This will be some good fullness. I'm stoked. So there's 2 gores. Here are 3 gores. Also, I think, so I'm thinking about the serger question, 3 and 4 threads. Our 4-thread serger that I'm using right here for stretch actually is set with a really narrow serge. So that also depends too on, everybody's serger is different. So 4 threads on this serger doesn't look wide, where 4 threads on a different serger might. So I'm getting down to my waist, and even though I slammed this out, it looks like it lines up. That's good. We had a gal took this class. I think she made 32 gores all the way around her costume. They were like 3/8 of an inch at the top. And it looked really, really cool. And really full at the bottom. Let me. It's 7:21. You know what? I might as well just cut out the back of this. I'm going to cut one more piece for the back so you guys can see it a little bit better. Let me cut another back. Actually, we're going to cut the whole back. So now's a good time for questions while I'm getting this really cool thing finished here. We're going to finish the whole back of these gores. So remember, again, we're imagining that this has lycra underneath it. Questions? Questions? Come on, come on, come on. Questions?
Could you also leave some of the gores unsewn to give a more deconstructed look?
Yes, and put a different color underneath it with a circle skirt so that it's all sorts of flashy stuff going on.
Is the mesh...
The sky's the limit.
Is the mesh going to be attached to the lycra?
Yeah, so that first piece, remember I drew my gores and then I retraced it. That would be the lycra that it's attached to. And you can decide where you want the trunk. You can put stuff basically anywhere. But this is kind of the idea behind it.
But no lycra in the skirt?
No, this is just going to be a mesh skirt. But you can do this same thing with lycra. There are no rules. Your imagination is the limit. Got my fancy weight here. Whoop. We're going to put this whole back together.
How do you or where would you attach it to the lycra?
This one, I would attach it just at the neck, and then I would put it on the girl, and see if the mesh is wanting to ride up her body depending on what her movement is. And then you can stitch in the ditch in a few spots down around the waist or the hips. You can stitch a few seams to the Lycra to hold it down. One more piece. Yeah, this will be better if we can see this whole thing.
If you guys have any questions about anything, now is the time to type them, since we're getting close to the end.
Yes, I'll be serging this, and then we will take the final few.
I've had a ballet teacher dislike a lace over Lycra top because it wasn't tight enough. Any suggestions on something like that? Is it possibly an issue with this, and how would you suggest that be fixed?
It just depends on how stretchy your lace is and whether or not, I would say make sure you leave yourself somewhere to alter it. So that, like, you should be able to tighten it up also. If the lace, often the laces aren't as stretchy, so you can also kind of use your design to help it do what you want. Okay, so I'm going to serge my other 3 pieces together. I can figure out how they go. Right? Make a right and a left, Travis, not 2 lefts. I don't know which is my back. That's my back. So that means this is my other back. Oh, this is a side. We're getting there. We're getting there. I'm excited because this is going to look really nice. Okay, just a couple more seams. Sewing this stuff is like trying to sew a cloud together.
He normally says fart.
You're normally say fart. There's some people here I don't know personally that's not going to watch it.
You haven't said anything inappropriate.
No, today, I guess
not during this one.
We drove through some of the off-color neighborhoods today, and I got it all out of my...
You're also not dealing with crotches as much.
Yeah, there's not as many crotches today. Oh, this is going to be so pretty. And then, too, going back, you know, thinking about stretch lace, I always find, you know, when I first started doing all this kind of stuff and building a portfolio and getting more jobs, is if I put something together and I didn't like the way it sewed up or I wasn't thrilled with it, I would often just pretend that it didn't happen. We're in a few different groups, and I read a lot of different discussions where the maker already knew something wasn't right, and then they plow through and finish, and then they're surprised that somebody else didn't like it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we want everything to be loved and adored, but nobody will know how much work went into it other than you. No, that's the psychology part of tonight.
Here's a question from yesterday to lengthen the back of the leotard. You do that at the waist, correct?
You can lengthen it anywhere you want. You just put a split horizontally from the center of the back towards the side and open up space. So it's like a reverse dart. If you kind of look at your measurements, you can see, is it that their back is long or is it that their butt is full? So if it looks like it's their butt, you would do it in the butt. Oh my gosh, it's almost time. It's time. It's time. Let me rip off her clothes here. Goodbye, Gertrude McBuzz. The same thing too, right? So with the leotards, make one up in a size, and if you feel it's not the tightness you desire, because everybody likes a different amount of tightness, if you make something and it's too tight, then you just know that I always make the girls one size up. Or if you make something and it's too loose, you might decide that you're always going to make something 2 sizes smaller or 3 sizes smaller, but you find out you're constant. Okay? Okay, here comes, here, get real close to this piece of beauty. I'm just pinning it on, and then hopefully everybody can see the swing in it. Does everybody see that pretty motion? And you can see where we added the tulip bit because it's even fuller. So you can see here is a tulip. At the center back is more tulip. And if you look at it sideways, you can see that it slowly gets longer towards the back. And it's so nice and even and pretty. And if it was all sewn to Lycra. So earlier we talked a second about where's the trunk and stuff. So you could have a complete leotard underneath here with no seam. You don't need a seam across the waist really of this. But if this starts to happen, if when she puts it on and it's crawling up the back, it means that your circumference is off. So if you have your gores tighter, when all your gores are sewn, if they're tighter around her body than her anatomy is, it means you need to make the gores tighter. So when you get wrinkles across something, like if the skirt wants to ride up, it means that it's too small. And I've also read some discussions where people have wrinkles crawling up, and often I see that the advice is to tighten it. It's only going to make it crawl up more. What you can do if the skirt is crawling up is flatten it out on the girl and stitch in the ditch on a few of the seams to help hold it down and nice and flush. I love the back of this. I think we're going to make this a pattern. That's pretty. Okay, last few questions. Did you find it fun and helpful? I hope.
This might have been a dress I wasn't listening. Where would you attach it to the leotard?
Yeah, so this one, I would attach it at the armhole and at the neck, and I would let the leotard, whichever trunk, if you put the boy short or the regular girl short on, you would connect the neck and the armhole, and it would just hang over the leotard. And if it's crawling up or flying up too much when she's moving, you would just put it on the girl and find a few places and actually stitch it in the ditch to keep the mesh anchored down nice. Just kidding. 5 minutes of questions. Now's the time.
Can you cut those on folds to eliminate stitching at all?
Well, let's look. The answer is no for this type of dress. So if we look at the center back, you can only cut things on folds where you've left a straight line, right? So I've got no straight lines on any of my pieces. You could cut the front on the fold. If you didn't want to seam up the front of this one, you would cut that on the fold. But the only time you can cut something on the fold is if you have an absolute straight line. And when I was like cutting my seams into this earlier, I mentioned straight lines can be boring. It's ties into patterning too. The more interest sometimes when something isn't even in fabric, the more interesting it will be when it's done. But sometimes nice, sleek, straight, even, you know, simple can be really pretty too. Simple's trickier because you've got to be more flawless with the balance and sewing of it. Where when you've got something like this, you can just hide all the flaws and it looks great. 2 more questions? 2 more questions? I'll hold a dog. Oh.
On yesterday's Leo, do you leave mesh top edge unfinished for professionals?
Yeah, usually. We've got a bodice. Well, we've got one that's finished and one that's not. Where's the one that's not? You can do either. Oftentimes we leave it unfinished because it blends in really nice to their body. This is a Midsummer Night's Dream top, and we put an 1/8 inch elastic in there with nude thread and rolled it over. So both are good. It's just really depends on what you want to do. You know, the just cut edge fits better. But if you do just the cut edge, remember to slice the neck and bring it in a little bit narrower.
Deborah Lehman says, when I was there's only one dog. Where did the extra dogs come from?
Oh, we've got 3. Rachel's got a dog and I've got 2. Come on, look at the camera.
Betty, you used to have 1 dog.
Yeah, I used to have just Basil. Yeah, that's true. Everett's newish.
They're all very spoiled.
No, they're not spoiled.
We go to the dog bakery sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, who's got the last question? Last question, and then we're out. I like to look at myself on the computer.
I'm covering this next one.
I know. We should put it up there on the wall.
I'm going to put a little face here for you to look.
No questions.
Any other questions? If you do think of questions later, just
here's one.
Message us on Facebook or send an email. Did you get a parking ticket yesterday?
Yeah, I did. I got a parking ticket yesterday.
$50.
Thanks, guys.
So yeah, just send us an email if you have any questions or Facebook message. Leave reviews if you enjoyed the class. We have more classes coming up.
The tutu classes are coming, and they're going to be amazing. We also are in the last moments of figuring out how to make a recording from yesterday available. And a recording, did we figure it out today?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I think we'll have it from
we just
today.
have to sort out the details.
And what we'll do is we'll offer a coupon code for the people that took the class so they can get a discount on the recording. Yeah, and then if you missed a class, you can also purchase a recording. And for future, we're not using the recording as a substitute for a class. So if you sign up for a class and miss it, you can take it again the next time without paying. But we're not using the recording as a substitute.
Stretch bodice class, question mark?
Yeah, in fact, we're finishing a fabulous neoprene pattern right now with and without straps that sews up really good with bones and it's stretchy. So that'll be for sale, and then we'll have it as a class. And we're probably going to add a bodice class in the summer too, where we spend a few hours just showing you nice tricks and techniques to making a really luxurious bodice.
When will we receive new Leo patterns from yesterday?
Who didn't get them? You need to message us, because as far as I can see in my outgoing email, everybody should have got the ones from Sew and Style or Travis Halsey. If you didn't, send us a message. But you should have, from taking this class, you should have the sleeve instructions, which when we update, we will send out. And the update's really just going to be fine-tuning the pictures. You should have booty short instructions and the set of Leo bases. Beyond that, there's nothing else.
What sort of dancer body type is the stretch bodice good for?
All of them. Big boobs, little boobs. It's stretchy. What?
Nothing. For those patterns, are they enlarged until the box is 3 inches?
Yes. So if you have the Male Big File ones, there was a snafu at the Male Big File site and it compressed them, which it won't happen again, I've been told. If you open them from my email, they're the right size. So let's talk about PDFs for 2 seconds. A PDF is a file that's frozen in a size. So generally, if you have a PDF, it should open to the right size. That means it might look small on your computer, but if you use Adobe Reader and say 100%, it should break it apart into the right amount of pages. The other thing to watch for is some people's emails or computers have all those boxes that pop up that we never read. A lot of times it's a box saying, this is huge, should we shrink it? And you might have said yes 3 years ago and be dealing with that still. Computers.
The best way to message us, some people are asking, you can email sewinstyle@hotmail.com or send us a Facebook message.
Messaging the Facebook page for Halsey Onstage is the best.
His email is horrible.
Yeah, and every now and then people are messaging, even though I know you personally. If you message me personally, I don't check that stuff often. I check the business one frequently.
Is it possible to print the booty files? I did not take the class.
Yeah, do you have them or do you need them sent?
Not sure.
If you guys don't need anything from us, you can start logging off. We'll just finish up with who's got non-Leotard class related questions.
I tried to put it on a thumb drive to take to my local copy shop and it didn't work. Is there a reason for that?
That's something on your end.
Yeah, it's just a file. It should go right on there. It's the JPEGs, but they don't print.
Oh, okay, here's another one. There were a few people sending me screenshots of their actual email accounts. On the bottom of an email, it'll say JPEG or PDF or this or that or this or that, and nothing will open because you haven't actually downloaded them. So some people email accounts, even though it says JPEG or image, it might not open. It actually needs to be clicked and opened, or download all, or download image. So if you just slide the text of a JPEG onto a memory stick, you've actually not slid the file. And we're going to make a couple movie helpers for some of the frequent troubleshootings that we run into. It's tricky too because everybody's email works different.
Any other questions?
I think we're going to say goodbye. Thank you guys very much. We really appreciate it. And we'll have more. And soon a men's unitard pattern. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.